Welcome to the Victory Project podcast, undoing hopelessness with a godly purpose, love, and accountability. Since 2009, we've believed it's less about what we do and more about what we undo through education, entrepreneurship, and enlightenment. You're here because you believe a city on a hill cannot be hidden. Let's shine that light. Let's build victory together.
Welcome to the Victory Project podcast, episode 43. Another amazing episode, I'll keep saying it, and an amazing guest who I'll introduce here shortly. But before we jump into that, I'll introduce who we have here working the show. I'll be your host, Keyshawn, Senior Program Director at our high school campus. And across from me, Mr. Cameron, his second episode ever. How you doing?
I'm doing good.
You're about 2 to 3 weeks in the summer, right? So what have you been doing for that time?
Sleeping.
Oh my gosh. I respect it. I should have known, right? Then to my right, a familiar face or sound and voice, Yakir, how you doing?
I'm blessed to be here.
And again, 2 to 3 weeks on summer vacation. What have you been doing?
Going to Victory Project.
Oh, man, yeah, I have seen you quite a bit, yeah. Then our guest, Darius Beckham, a Dayton City Commissioner. How you doing?
Man, I'm glad to be here as well. First podcast ever. So thank you all for having me.
That's awesome, yeah. We appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us. And I'll read his bio. Darius is a lifelong Dayton resident, public servant, and community advocate focused on building a more equitable, thriving city. Elected to the City Commission in 2025, he previously served as a senior policy aide in the mayor's office, AmeriCorps neighborhood organizer, and project coordinator with the Hunger Hall Initiative. A University of Dayton graduate with a master's in public administration, he now champions neighborhood investment, public safety, and economic opportunity for all Dayton families. Wow, impressive. And we'll jump straight in. We'll start with neighborhoods and housing. Why is one of your priorities vacant properties, affordable housing, and home ownership?
Yeah, thank you, Keyshawn. And I'm eager to talk about every one of these priorities today. But I just want to start, even before I answer this, by giving just Victory Project a personal shout out. I born and raised in Dayton, as my bio said, but when I was at the University of Dayton, I got introduced to the Victory Project. I was in a group on campus called Dayton Civic Scholars, and we got off campus a lot, did a lot of volunteering. And I remember coming to the Victory Project as like a sophomore at UD, and remember just being in the space and just being extremely impressed by the mission, the impact, all the young men that I met during that time. And to now be sitting here, getting interviewed, right, as a Dayton City Commissioner, but also just seeing Victory Project's growth throughout the city and just the vision just come to life more and more. Super full circle moment. So I just want to give VP their flowers and Monty Bush and his leadership and his whole team. So I'm so glad to be here. So glad to support Victory Project, and the kind of long relationship that I've had didn't start when I was a commissioner, right? It started back when I was in college. So just wanted to give that context. Specific to your question, a family, a resident, a city is not strong without stable housing and thriving neighborhoods. I am a proud homeowner. I live in Five Oaks. I've been a homeowner for about the last 4 years. And being a young homeowner comes with a lot of challenges, but you also get to experience a neighborhood for the first time, right? As someone that now has accountability, right? Now has responsibility for this home. And when I drive through my neighborhood, right? When I drive through all of our city, right? I want the same thing that our families want, right? Which is safe streets, right? Nice housing, clean neighborhoods, right? And that is key to the desirability of someone to want to live in our city, right? The desirability of someone to want to raise a family in our city. So it is extremely pivotal. It is extremely important, right? That we continue to get rid of vacant and blighted housing, right? That we know is, a drain on neighborhoods, right? It attracts all the wrong things. And of course, there's even mental health aspects, right? On having to look at a property that should be torn down day after day after day. So that is extremely important to me, but more than just tearing those vacant houses down, building new housing, right? Supporting programs and initiatives that provide families that might not be able to otherwise own a home, right? Getting them into homes, right? And last but not least, right, making sure that it's affordable. Habitat for Humanity, for instance, huge partner of the city of Dayton. Every time I get to go to one of their home dedications, it's emotional, right? I'm not saying I'm standing there crying, right? But it is amazing to see this family after family for that matter, become homeowners for no interest mortgages, right? brand new home, and to be able to really become a part of that neighborhood and to become, within the fabric of that particular block, right? It's amazing to watch, right? Because we know how difficult it is, right, to pay rent right now, right? As folks are charging asinine prices, right? So to get in a home for a good price and to be able to stay in that home without getting priced out in a nice and safe neighborhood where you can, build your family and create generational wealth. Every time that happens in Dayton, we become a stronger city.
That's good.
What thriving neighborhoods actually look like on Dayton grounds?
Yeah, thank you, Yakir, for the question. Thriving neighborhoods look safe, right? They look like they have amenities, right? So places where kids can go outside, right? Walk to the playground, right? Play out front, right? Thriving neighborhoods are those in which residents and actual neighbors look out for one another, right? I can't tell you all how many times, right, just throughout my journey that I've heard, my elders, right, or folks in, older generations say to me, well, things aren't like they used to be, right? And, folks don't look out for each other the way they used to, right? Sure, right? That I don't disagree that that's not true, but like for me, that's a decision, right? We don't
Mm.
just have to accept that as reality, right? You can be the person that says, hey, I'm going to look out for the people on my block, right? I'm going to make sure that if I see something, I'm going to say something, right? I'm going to make sure that my neighbors feel like I care, right? You can be that person. You don't just have to say, "Hey, things ain't like they used to be no more." Well, hey, we're here, right? We can set the tone, right? We can pave a new reality. So, I think thriving neighborhoods are neighborhoods where people are responsible for themselves, one another, and they prioritize, safety as well as just making sure that the neighborhood continues to grow, right? That we're not regressing, but that we're progressing.
All right. Could you talk about why investing in downtown Dayton is important and what are some things that are being done?
Yeah, thanks, Cameron. So, it's hard to talk about neighborhoods, right, without also talking about, right, downtown. The little known fact that most people probably don't think about too often is the fact that Dayton is funded purely by income tax, right? Which means if you work in the city of Dayton, you pay taxes, right, on your salary, and that is used by the city of Dayton in what's called our general fund, which allows us to actually provide services to residents. So, waste collection, right? Water, right? Street repaving, right? Upgrading parks, right? All of those things, right? Those basic services that a city provides. We use income tax dollars to do that. But the majority, over 70% of that income tax is generated, guess where? Downtown Dayton, right? So we know that that is our core. We know that that's the business center. We know that's where so many jobs are located. So it's important to keep employers downtown. It's important to keep headquartered companies downtown. And it's important to, really try to garner more small businesses and more entrepreneurs, right, downtown. And we've certainly made some strides over the years, but we simply have to keep doing that, not just because we want a nice downtown, right? That's not the only reason, right? Sure, we want a nice downtown for people to go and, right, have leisure experiences, right, and eat, right, and play and all those things, right? But it's also about making sure that we continue to generate the income tax to actually pay to make our neighborhoods nicer as well.
All right. Can you tell me how does the Dayton Violence Intervention Program work?
Yeah, so this is a program that I had the pleasure of helping start when I was working for our former mayor, Jeffrey Mims. The program basically is set up as a violence intervention team that is deployed in a particular neighborhood geography, right? And, in government, right, you don't want to just make decisions based off of vibes. You don't want to make decisions based off of how you feel. In government, when you're dealing with people's tax dollars, right, you want to make sure that you're making decisions based on what the data says, right? So the data that we were provided based on violent incidents and violent calls throughout the community told us that, hey, this is the neighborhood that could use this program the most. So The program is actually deployed in the North Riverdale neighborhood. If you were to drive up North Main Street, right before you kind of hit that curve, you would see their location. It's a big Stop the Violence banner outside. And the host nonprofit of the program is an organization called Felons with a Future. So that is led by Mr. Greg West. A guy named Curtis Peanut Johnson is our program lead. So I meet with them on a weekly basis, just about. But their job and the team's job is to proactively stop violent incidents in the target area. And they do that through building relationships in those neighborhoods, really being on the ground and accessible and visible on every one of those blocks and walking and canvassing, and being able to actually have the relationships in that neighborhood so much so that they are actually able to intervene if there is altercations or conflicts that are brewing that could become violent. But more than that, one of the other functions of the program is to stop retaliatory events, right? So we know unfortunately, most of the shootings and most of the incidents that we have that happen in our city sometimes are retaliatory, which means that this particular incident is a response to a prior incident. And this program exists to kind of stop that back and forth, right? If we could lower the temperature, engage the particular parties that are involved in the conflict, the goal is to stop the retaliation. And that is really how the program works. It is early, right? The program is not even 6 months old, right? The training ended in March. So they've actually been on the ground in the neighborhood for just the last few months. But my goal, right, is to get this program the proper funding and support and long-term expanded throughout every neighborhood that's experiencing violence.
That's amazing. Yeah. And I know most people that either advocate for something or against something have kind of their hearts really in it. So if you could talk a little bit about why these issues like gun violence are personal for you.
Sure. Thanks for the question. I'm going to tell a personal story that is probably the first time I've ever actually shared in public, but I don't have, I would say, a direct experience with gun violence, but my mom does. I have never met my mom's parents, and that is because they were both victims of gun violence when she was just a child. My mom wasn't even like 9 or 10 years old by the time that she had lost both her parents to gun violence. And you could imagine, right? Like my dad's parents, right? Like I grew up knowing them, right? I identified them on his side, right? These are my grandparents, right? But I didn't have that same experience on my mom's side. And I remember as I got older, getting to the place where I started just asking my mom, hey, what happened to your parents? Like, tell me about your childhood, right? What did you experience, right? What did you and your siblings go through? And hearing that, right? Listening to that as a young man, although, right, like it wasn't something I went through, I felt like I of course resonated and felt the pain of that situation, right, as a byproduct of my mom, right? As someone that obviously came from her and my dad, right? It's impossible not to hear that, right? And understand that and not recognize how traumatizing, right? How painful, right? How heartbreaking that is, right? And it's always stayed with me, right? Like anytime I see a family, right, going through gun violence, right, or experiencing a shooting, right, that has taken the life of, someone that they love, I think about my mom's childhood. So when I look at numbers on a piece of paper, right, that are folks that have been lost in this city, they're not just numbers to me, right? There are families, right, households that are forever impacted by this level of senseless, unnecessary, and preventable violence.
Thank you
Well,
for sharing that. I'm sorry. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think it's so easy, especially in the city of Dayton, to get desensitized
It
to
is,
those
and
things.
so many of us have become desensitized to it. When I see headlines of shooting or person killed, right? For me, right, sure, there's a level of responsibility given like the role I hold as a commissioner, right? Like I don't just read that and think, all right, it happened again, right? I mean, the number one job, right, of being in public office is keeping your citizens safe, keeping your residents safe. So that's a priority for me. But, as I said, when I sometimes look at the comments, right, or when I sometimes have conversations about this, the level of, oh, that's just our city. We can't accept that. We can't normalize that. I understand it happens way too often, but I will never be someone that feels like this is normal. It is not normal.
What are some ways as a community that we could help with public safety?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think there's a number of ways, right? For one, I think just speaking up, right? I just, I was on my soapbox just now, right? Because I get passionate, right? This is for me, right? This is it's personal, right? It's a labor of love, right? So for me, like when I have these conversations, I think about this stuff. It strikes a nerve for me, so I can't help it. But number one, we have to not normalize it. We've got to consistently speak up. We've got to consistently make it known and obvious that this is not the type of city we want to have. That's number one. We can never, right, just say, all right, this is what it is. So number one is consistently speaking up and being an advocate for peace and anti-violence. It's also, right, being an example to your peers, right? I don't take it lightly that I'm a 28-year-old city commissioner, right? I am trying to really blaze the trail for young people to step up and take this city into their own hands. So being an example in the circles that you exist within, right? We've all, I think, been in spaces and places where, friends of ours or people in our network, right, might not see the world see the world the way we do, right? But still trying to be the best positive voice and example to your peers and to the generation coming behind you is very necessary. I worked for a mayor who spent his entire career in public education, so you can't imagine how much he would really preach to me about how it's not going to take people like him with gray hair to change the next generation. It's going to take other young people and, really being someone in your circle, right? And among your other, fellow youth who is a leader, right? Who is saying, hey, this is the direction I'm going. I'm going to set a tone. I'm going to set an example of what I think I'm capable of and the vision that I have for my life. I think that's extremely important. And then last but not least, we have to create more safe spaces for our young people. We have to create more safe spaces. Summertime is always a lot more concerning, right, for cities because y'all are out of school, right? So we know that young people who unfortunately may not be in safe spaces and may be involved in the wrong things, right? They have more time on their hands in the summer, right? And that time can often lead to negative behavior, right? That hurts our city, right? And hurts that young person. So we desperately need to create more safe spaces. So anyone listening to this podcast, for one, I want you guys to know the Victory Project is one of those spaces, right? That is not only a safe space for young men and young women, but it's a productive, space where young men and young women are gaining the skills that they need to succeed at life. We have to replicate these type of spaces throughout every part of our city. So I'm proud of the work Omega CDC is doing. I'm proud of the work Dayton Boys and Girls Club is doing to create programming, to create safe spaces. And as a city commissioner, I am going to spend these 4 years that I have in this term really trying to lift up, safe spaces for our young people and support the leaders and the programs and the organizations that are dedicated, right, to giving our young people spaces to just be.
What is your vision for small business growth, support of minority and women-owned businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. Earlier when we talked about, just the need to keep the businesses that are headquartered in Dayton here, when we talked about the need to bring in new entrepreneurs, part of the vibrancy of, right, the small business space, right, is making sure that we have, right, women-owned businesses, right, minority-owned businesses. The city has programs in place, right, to make sure that, minority and women-owned businesses who could potentially partner with the city, that they have the opportunity to do so, right, whether it's construction, whether it's a service-based business, those opportunities exist through our Human Relations Council, which is HRC. But in addition to that, I think, when I think about the next 5, 10 years of small business growth in Dayton, it is absolutely going to be a matter of our ability to be a small business friendly city, to really continue to do things like the first floor fund, right, which was small business loans, right, to entrepreneurs, both minority and women owned, and any and everyone that had a great business idea or concept that wanted to locate it in our city, right? The city actually helped them do it and provided funds. So my vision is really, Dayton getting smarter about how we support small businesses, but also being able to maintain the success of the minority and women owned businesses that are already succeeding in our city. We don't need them to close their doors. We need them to keep opening more businesses.
Right. Ooh. How are you connecting Dayton's young people to careers and leadership opportunities?
Yeah, I love this question, right? Because this is what it's really all about for me. You know, for me, becoming a commissioner is really about just helping identify how we build this city for the next generation, right? I, I have the pleasure, right, of helping chart that path, but I'm more so thinking about like who's coming behind me, right? So number one, as I think about careers and leadership opportunities for young people, it's a matter of supporting and helping fund, right, through City Hall programs and initiatives that are doing that. So for one, we spoke about the Dayton Boys and Girls Club earlier. Their new building will have a workforce readiness center inside of it. So that's going to be extremely critical to get young people more interested in jobs, to get them thinking about careers and things that, might be attracted to them after they graduate high school. But even in addition to that, right, I would love to be able to create more internship opportunities at City Hall, right? To be able to open the door for young people interested in jobs in various departments that we have, whether it's water, whether it's public works, whether it's, even our law department, right? I think we could scale, right, those opportunities to just get young people more interested in, city jobs, right? The jobs that keep our city operating and running. So, it's twofold, right? It's about supporting the programs and the organizations that are creating those safe spaces with workforce opportunities, but it's also about us at City Hall setting the example and bringing more young people into our doors. One of the things I'm really proud of as of late is we just I, along with my colleagues, the mayor, the other commissioners, just adopted what will be called the City of Dayton's Youth Cabinet. And that is going to be basically a leadership table of all of the organizations, the major organizations that provide services to young people, so that we're bringing all of our brains together, right? All of our different ideas, all of our energy, all of our visions and mission, and really being able to identify what are the needs and what are the gaps that we can fill both short and long term for what young people have told us is important to them. So, and this is not random work. This is work that we've been building up to. When I worked for Mayor Mims, we started surveying young people across the city, and we did that for almost probably like 2 to 3 years. And we have all that data, and the culmination, right, the collection of that data will now allow us to really, right, put dollars, right, and action, right, and, actually decision making behind what those young people told us they wanted, what those young people said they need. So our ability to, convene that group and really as a collective start making decisions for the young people who have already said, right, these are the things that are important to us. Now we just got to figure out how to do it.
It's good. We touch on this a little bit, but if you could talk about the importance of the adults in the community mentoring our youth.
Yeah, it's when we think about safe spaces for young people, right? It's one thing for like, a young person in Dayton to have a space like Victory Project or to have a space like the Boys and Girls Club or one of Omega's many programs. And there's more out there, right? I also want to give a shout out to Dayton Urban Young Life, right? Like we have good programs, right? But it's one thing for a young person to just be in that space. It's another for them to find someone that truly is invested in their future, right? Who is going to not just see them in the space and say, hey, how you doing? Right? I'm glad you're here, right? But like, hey, how can I help you? Right? What do you want to do with your life? Where do you see yourself going right after you finish school? Those are the questions, right, that a mentor ask. And I had those, right? I still have those, right? Even as a commissioner, and this is just a piece of advice that I want to give to, Cameron and Yakir and Kishan as well. I mean, you all, while you're in this space, right? Like, it doesn't end here. You will have mentors for the rest of your life, and you should always, I think, remember, right, that you're never not going to need people, right, to lean on. You're never not going to need to pick up the phone and ask somebody, hey, what should I do in this situation? Right? Can you give me some advice? I still have people that I definitely can lean on and call when I don't know what to do, right? Or when I need some guidance and some help. So mentors are absolutely key. Like, absolutely key, because our ability to create safe spaces, more safe spaces in this city, while simultaneously, right, giving those young people adults that truly care about their futures, is life changing. It is life changing. And I wouldn't be here, right, if I didn't have people keeping me on the right track. If I didn't have people saying, hey, don't make that decision, make this one.
Yeah.
Don't go left, go right. Like, you have to have those, right? And I try to be that, right, for young men that, I've bonded with over the years. But I also I have that in my own life, right? And I think we all need that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. On the idea of age, what are some of the challenges that come with being one of the youngest in your field, and how did you overcome that?
Conviction, truly. I mean, if you have conviction, age doesn't matter. And when I say conviction, you got to know, you have to know who you are. That's number one. And I don't say that in a prideful way at all. But I mean, like, you have to know what you have to give. You have to know what you offer the public, and you have to know what gifts God has given you, right? What talents and what interests and curiosities God has instilled within you. And you've got to have that level of self-awareness to say, hey, this is the path that I feel like I'm on, and you've got to be so convinced that you're making the right and taking the right steps that you don't get off that path. Sure, distractions will come, right? Sure, there's times when you'll get discouraged, right? Not only am I young, but I'm impatient, and I that's one of the things that I have to like check within myself, right? Because I always want to move fast, right? I'm like, how can we do this faster, right? How do I get this done faster, right? Things aren't moving fast enough. I'm consistently battling that, but you've got to just know, right, that you are who you think you are, right? And you can do what you've set out to do. And when you have that level of faith, you don't let people talk you out of it, right? You don't allow your age to become a deficit to you. But you also simultaneously have to be humble enough to know what you don't know. Sure, I'm a city commissioner. I thank God, right, that this city had enough faith in me to elect me. There's still a lot for me to learn, right? Like, there's still a lot for me to figure out, right, in terms of how to be an asset, right, to this community. And as challenges come along, right, as I get pulled in this direction and that direction, and, as I learn to deal with all of the, the chaos sometimes, because it gets chaotic. Like, don't get me wrong, right? This is not a peaceful job, right? It definitely gets chaotic at times, and I have to go back to my center, right? I have to go back to those mentors. And I've also got to stay humble enough to recognize, like, I'm still learning, right? And, grace and mercy is very necessary, right? When you're trying to do the right thing, because you're not always going to know. You're not always going to know, what should happen next. But one of the adages I use all the time is you got to build the plane while you're flying it, And yes, that is a shout out to the Wright brothers, right? Because we know that flight was invented in Dayton, right? So I oftentimes think about the fact that they were trying to fly a plane when a plane literally hadn't existed before that. You know what I mean? Like, they were building something that had never existed and then trying to fly it, right? So when you're on this journey, right, when you're figuring out your path and you're building, right, whatever you're going to do to impact this world, you got to know that, like, you're building it while you're flying. And that's going to require you to, like, just stay curious, right? And stay humble and stay convicted about what you're trying to do.
That's good. You need to put that on a t-shirt, right? We'll close with this last question, and we'll start with Yakir, and then we'll go around and we'll all answer it, okay? But before the show, we kind of talked about who was viewing the show, not only people in the city of Dayton who were talking about the community here today, but also all around the globe, right? If you could give our listeners something where they're not just somebody who's living at a house on a street, but instead they're a neighbor and a member of the community that's pouring into where they live, what would you tell them to start? Or what would you tell them to do?
I would tell them just give faith to God, and if they have kids and their kids are getting in trouble, then try their hardest to get them into a youth group. The multiple youth groups that Mr. Beckham had named, they're all helpful, especially Victory Project. Victory Project is now accepting females because they're opening a women's campus. So I would just say in a youth group.
Yeah, thank you for this question. This is a really nice note to close on. I would say, similar to Yakir's excellent point, like there are resources, right? There are resources. And first of all, this community cares and we want you to get connected because there is no shortage of, I think, programs, initiatives, people, right, that want you to be stable, right? Want you to thrive, right? Want you to see Dayton as a place that you don't have to leave, right? To have a good life, but a place where you can grow with the city. So yeah, I'd stop there.
I would tell them that, like, anything that they think they can do it. Like, there's so much that people doubt themselves for. And, like, if you think like that, you're not going to get anything done.
Amen.
So that's what I would tell them.
I won't go on too much of a soapbox, but I would just say the golden rule: treat others as you would want to be treated, right? If you see somebody doing something, to somebody speak up as you would want somebody, if they were doing something to somebody that you love, you'd want them to speak up in the exact same way. But this was an awesome episode. Cameron, Yakir, thanks for helping co-host the show.
Thanks for now allowing me to co-host.
You're welcome.
Appreciate y'all, man. Thank you, gentlemen. This has been a pleasure.
It was a pleasure having you.
And thank you for joining us, but taking some time out of your day. And thanks to those who are watching this current episode. If you want to check out any of our previous, you can check us out on Spotify, iHeart, Apple, Amazon, faithandfriendsradio.com, and YouTube. Take care and God bless.
Thanks for listening to the Victory Project podcast. If you believe in changing lives through faith, discipline, and opportunity, then you're in the right place. Keep showing up. Keep being the light. Until next time, remember, victory isn't just a destination. It's a way of life. Learn more at victoryproject.org.